This is the Becoming Muslim podcast at untoislam.com, the show that helps people convert to Islam with hosts from the US, UK, and Australia.
So I had been studying political philosophy, and that led me to be more interested in politics. And then, of course, 9/11 happened, which made me want to understand what's happening in the world and why is this happening? What's really going on out there? And that doesn't make any sense. A faith, a world religion, one of the main monotheistic faiths of the world, like that you learn about it, however nominally in school growing up, like it is one of the world's faiths. How could it be this bad, right? So then now you can't maintain that cognitive dissonance. You can't maintain that chaos in the mind. And so many people started to look into it so that they could understand better. And then by looking into it and understanding better, they realized actually it does not promote any of that horrific, activity like terrorism, but actually it's intended for all of mankind. And it's the thing that my soul has been searching for forever. And then, of course, Islam being in the media and everyone talking about it in that sense just made it even that much more actually exciting to me that I would be able to prove that religions were man-made and just, a big sham. I completely stopped reading all of the other books. I all but forgot about the project that I intended to complete. And now I just began reading this book out of pure fascination and also need in a way, because I found that I would read the Quran and it would be addressing my life. It would be informing my life today, well over 1,000 years later. It was so relevant and it was actually helping me. It was almost as if it was written for me. Huge difference in the way that the Quran communicates, and it became an experience where I completely stopped reading all of the other books. I all but forgot about the project that I intended to complete, and now I just began reading this book out of pure fascination and also need in a way, because I found that I would read the Quran and it would be addressing my life. It would be informing my life today, well over 1,000 years later. It was so relevant and it was actually helping me. And then by looking into it and understanding about it, they realized actually it does not promote any of that horrific, activity like terrorism, but actually it's intended for all of mankind. And it's the thing that my soul has been searching for forever. And so I love the idea of like opening up that door and letting women step into that power and owning it, and then being able to really, feel great about their life, feel empowered, and then empower those around them as well.
Bismillah, Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all. Thank you for joining us today on the Becoming Muslim podcast, a part of untoislam.com. Please check out the website for more information on the topic of converting to Islam, where you can always submit any questions you may have via that website. Today we are speaking with Danielle LoDuca, a transformative health and fitness coach who converted to Islam in 2002, almost 20 years ago. Danielle is 41 years old, originally from New York, but currently lives in Florida, and is passionate about helping women discover and build confidence in their own strength, overcome, overwhelm, and live to their fullest potential. She is also passionate about helping others with their journeys to and in Islam. Some of Danielle's hobbies include horseback archery, reading and studying neuroscience, horses, and personal development. Assalamu alaikum, Danielle, and welcome to the Becoming Muslim podcast.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Thanks.
Thank you. So let's begin by taking your story back to the beginning. Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood and how your relationship with God looked like during that time?
Sure. So my childhood, I think I had a really beautiful childhood, filled with a lot of, experiences and opportunities. As far as my relationship with God, formally, I was in classes that to teach me religion, which was Catholic at the time. But there wasn't really much talk about like who is God? Why are we on earth? It was just kind of like you have to go to these classes. This is what we do. And so it wasn't really coming from there, but I did have a very innate sense of, someone out there that I could communicate with. And so, like as a child, I have some memories of, kind of praying on my own without recognizing or understanding that I was praying, but only looking back at it actually after having become a Muslim, looking back to those childhood experiences and being like, wow, I was actually praying to God, and I would repeat the things over and over again. And, then I would see the results in my life. And so I knew that there was some kind of reciprocal relationship, but I didn't know actually who it was with, honestly. Like, I didn't think I'm speaking to my creator or I'm speaking to God, or I didn't really know that piece of it, but I just knew that I could ask and things would happen in my life. And so that's what I would say would really be the extent of it. And as a child,
Mm-hmm.
and then as a young adult, I really started becoming disdainful of religion. So that wasn't really, about my relationship with God. But again, it was very detached from who is God and what is our purpose in life and how did we get here.
Mm-hmm.
And it was much more about the idea of organized religion that sort of really turned me off and, set me on a different path.
Mm-hmm. And did you have an experience with something that made you sort of disdainful towards that, or was it just sort of an innate feeling?
That's actually a great question. I have not actually thought about that one. It just seemed to be something that developed over time. I don't remember a specific instance, but I think my experience in those classes, for example, learning about religion, I did ask questions when things didn't quite make sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess not really ever having been satisfied in that. And then what I guess it really was that as I got older, I started becoming much more of a critical thinker and really critical of things around me, things that people would say, how people would do things. And so I thought that I don't want to do something without really knowing why I'm doing it, because I went from kind of following the crowd and feeling like I had to fit in and feeling like I had to do everything, quote unquote, right, to asking myself, like, why do I have to do these things this way? What do they mean? Where do these traditions and practices and social norms come from?
Right.
And do I really need to adhere to them or not? And so I think it came out of that kind of questioning that led me to think like, well, I'm not going to blindly follow this ancient book or these people who stand up on a pulpit and just tell me things like at face value. I'm not going to take that. Right. So I think it was more just that the kind of inquisitiveness, criticalness, like, let me find out first where these things come from. Actually, in the beginning, I was not that methodical, like, oh, let me find out where they came from first. I was just like, you guys are just blindly following stuff. I'm not with you on that. I'm going to follow my own path.
Right.
Yeah.
It's probably, a pretty common sort of reaction to organized religion, especially in, the Western world, because a lot of people will reject organized religion just on the fact that they think that it's the basis of like fighting and, wars and stuff, when really it's sort of like a propaganda. They use organized religion to sort of they kind of throw mud on religions in order to make them look bad so that people don't follow, and use them for like political motives and stuff. So sometimes that can sort of tarnish the idea of organized religion, and people tend to judge the religions by the people who follow them. And of course, we all know that no human is perfect except for the prophet, peace be upon him. So, it's not a abnormal feeling that you were feeling during that time? I think a lot of people feel like that. They're sort of afraid to follow something that they might be, falling into some sort of a cult or something. So when did you decide, hey, I think I need to study, religion to figure out if it's for me or not?
Yeah. So I think, the part of me rejecting religion in the first place was that I believed that the human mind is capable of making its own decisions and discerning right from wrong and understanding the world and the universe and sort of choosing a path to follow in that life. And that we didn't need to rely on something, an ancient book or old ideas, and just follow them blindly. And then, I didn't really think much about religion after that kind of rejection, until I went through, studying philosophy, and then I began getting interested in political philosophy, and I took a class in political philosophy. And that's when the similarity between political philosophy and religion, came to my mind. And I realized that political philosophies are ways of life that are created by human beings, and no one questions that. And, when you look at them, you can see the faults. So you can compare different political philosophies, and you see how one of them may work in one area of life and one of them may work in another area of life, but all of them are flawed in one way or another. Mm-hmm. And, for political philosophy, that's fine. You can pick and choose, and, you can create a new one. You can iterate, because they are man-made. But then it started to make me realize that religion is essentially doing the same exact thing as a political philosophy, that it's creating a way of life or setting forth a way of life for people. But the difference was religions are claiming that they're from a divine source. Mm-hmm. And so, I thought, well, maybe that kind of add-on is there in the case of religions, because that was the sort of motivation to get people to follow this. If you tell people it's from a higher power, if it's from your creator, right, then they're much less likely to rebel against it. They think there's something more to this or higher purpose, and that will keep them sort of in line. Mm-hmm. And so I thought it would be fantastic if I could methodically show, by comparing political philosophy side by side with religion, that religions are also man-made and just as flawed as any political philosophy, and that we don't actually have to follow them in that way as if they're infallible. Mm-hmm. And so that's what set me on the path towards studying religion. Otherwise I would never have given it a second thought. I would have been happy just with my philosophies and my own brain, critical thinker. And so my purpose in researching the religion was to show that it's a man-made thing. And so I started reading. I had to, acquire the books necessary to do that kind of study. So I began reading the Bible. I had the Bhagavad Gita, which I read, and, started learning about Buddhism, reading books about that. Mm-hmm. And then the Quran basically, almost fell into my lap in a way. So it wasn't even a part of my initial project. It wasn't really on my radar until after the attacks on September 11th. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, Islam being in the media and everyone talking about it in that sense, just made it even that much more actually exciting to me, that I would be able to prove that religions were man-made and just, a big sham, because that would basically, really show the people who are following this thing as if it's from God, and then doing, harmful things as a result. Like it would just show how mistaken and misguided and ridiculous they really were. Right. So I found that really enticing. Yeah. So that's where I started.
And what did that lead you into?
So, at first it was a lot of laborious reading. So reading some of the other scriptures was a lot of work. It was hard to focus. It was hard to, get through it and really understand and connect the dots inside those books and understand what the purpose of the book was. So I felt it ended up being a pretty daunting task in the beginning. Right, yeah. And then when it came to the Quran, it was such a different experience. So in the beginning, it was for the same exact reason. But as I began, and at first I did have a hard time reading the Quran. I tried reading from the beginning to the end at first. And that was a little bit difficult. So
Mm-hmm.
thank God I was actually something, I think God guided me, but I ended up reading from the back to the front instead. So I started with the smaller chapters at the back and
Mm-hmm.
ended up working my way towards the beginning of the Quran. And that proved to be a much easier way to read it for the first time, which I
Mm-hmm.
found out later is because it's much closer to the way that it was actually revealed when the verses of the Quran were coming
Mm-hmm.
down from God to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. So I began reading it in that way. And then through that process, I was able to just see such a huge difference in the way that the Quran communicates. And it became an experience where I completely stopped reading all of the other books. I all but forgot about the project that I intended to complete. And now I just began reading this book out of pure fascination and also like need in a way, because I found that I would read the Quran and it would be addressing my life. It would be informing my life,
Right.
today, well over 1,000 years later. It was so relevant and it was actually helping me. And it was almost as if it was written for me. That's how I felt when I was reading it. And so that blew me away.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So did you start with your research into Islam? Did you start attending like mosques and like getting to know different Muslims? And what was your take on, because you were starting to become interested in Islam during the time of like the age of terrorism and just sort of like, again, like mud throwing something. It was almost like, the religion was hijacked, quote unquote, because we as Muslims know that it has nothing to do with suicide bombings or killing other people. And it's really hard for, I think, Muslims to understand, like, how can people get away with lying about this religion, and so that's why it all comes back to study. Like, study is liberating, and it's so it guides you towards closer to the truth, God willing. And so how did studying Islam and becoming sort of getting to know the community better, how was that during the time of September 11th?
So initially, including when I was researching the other religions, I actually didn't go to practitioners of the religion to learn about them, and I was learning solely from texts, primarily the actual religious texts. And so I read the Quran first without even reading any other books on Islam, just only from the Quran for a year. So that was my focus was like that. I actually didn't know any Muslims. So it's kind of like, that was another thing where I something kind of fell in my lap. The way I came across the Quran was very almost, it was unlikely. It looks very designed looking back at it, because I was in the right place at the right time where I didn't expect to even be there, and ended up getting a copy of the Quran. And then when it comes to meeting Muslims for the first time, I had been studying political philosophy, and that led me to be more interested in politics. And then, of course, 9/11 happened, which made me want to understand what's happening in the world and why is this happening? What's really going on out there that would cause something like this to happen? And so my investigation of that ended up taking me overseas, and I went to Palestine, and I ended up in the West Bank, and as an international observer. And when I was there, so that was actually my first time interacting with Muslims. It was my first time being kind of embedded with Muslims. Of course, we were with Christians as well, and Jews as well. But it was my first encounter with Muslims. And I was given a little bit of background knowledge, like about the culture and, what's polite and what's not polite, and some basic words and phrases to interact with them there. But definitely being there was powerful on a few levels. One of them was that I did get to hear the call to prayer. I got to hear the Quran that I had been reading for a year at the time recited, which was extremely powerful. And then, yes, there was the interaction of the actual Muslim community with me, and what I witnessed and what I experienced as being a part of their lives for several weeks and living inside their homes and, experiencing like daily life with them under severe circumstances. Seeing the power of their faith, which I came to realize like later on, because obviously I was there in very worldly interests at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first things that really started to pique my interest was when I saw, one woman, there was so much destruction, so much devastation, and seeing a woman who had basically lost everything. And she was literally standing in front of the rubble of her home, her family home, with all of her belongings inside, just having lost everything.
Oh.
And she's saying this word, repeatedly, Alhamdulillah.
Wow.
And so being curious, I asked one of the, Arabic speaking people I was with, like, what is she saying? And they translated it to mean thank God, which, now I know it means even more than that. But
Mm-hmm.
at the moment, it caused so much cognitive dissonance for me. Like, how could someone having experienced that level of devastation and destruction and living under these circumstances for her lifetime, like she was a middle-aged woman,
Mm-hmm.
How could she be grateful
Mm-hmm.
to God in a moment like that? How could she be faithful? How could she be thankful?
Mm-hmm.
And so that really was something that, created, like opened a door in my brain. Like, what is that? I need to understand what this is all about. And so the level of faith that some of the people had, of course, it's not ubiquitous, but some of the faith that some people demonstrated and their commitment to being good people, to being kind, to being generous, to being patient, and just being good natured and being forgiving, the level of all of those qualities I just mentioned was higher in some of these people than I had seen in people who are living, lives that you would imagine you would want to be grateful for. Right. So it's like, living through this devastation and then having that gratitude and then not feeling that somehow God had forsaken them.
Right.
Why me? Why is this happening to me? But instead fixing their intention on, I am going to come out of this experience with the most pure soul I possibly can. And how am I going to do that? By being the best person, with the most goodness, the most kindness, the most patience, maintaining my prayers, maintaining that connection with my creator and realizing that, all of this could be good for me in the end. And that was so powerful, seeing that and feeling that and living amongst people who are actually living that way was incredibly powerful.
Wow, what an experience you had. I mean, really, it really feels like God was really, I mean, your path was so guided. Like looking, maybe you can see this looking back. But from what you're telling us, it's just, I mean, you read the Quran for a year by yourself without knowing any Muslims. I mean, just reading the Quran like alone is a really difficult task to do without like a tafsir, which is an explanation of the context of the verses. So the fact that you were able to get through that and were attracted to it, I mean, a lot of people I think are intimidated by it because they might understand some of the verses, but there's a lot of things in there that are like, whoa, what does this mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? And so to stick by that for a year and then get guided and transported into a place that would give you an experience of like one of the highest levels of faith that a human could have in Palestine with what they've gone through and the genocide they're continuously going through for so many years now, and to recognize that there's something else there. They obviously have something that we don't, inside. And what is that, And I think a lot of people might, say, what, that's weird, and then not look into it. But you actually said, wait a minute, I need to know what these people have that we don't have back home because there's something special here. So, after that trip, I'm assuming you came back home, and how did your journey continue?
Yeah. So after that experience, I came back. I was living in Brooklyn at the time. And I mean, hearing the Quran recited and then living amongst those people and having those experiences,
Mm-hmm.
and then having had read the Quran for an entire year prior,
Mm-hmm.
I just felt thirsty to know more. And that's when I began reading books about Islam in addition to the Quran. So I would sit in the library with books piled on my desk until closing
MashaAllah.
and reading and reading and reading and reading anything I could get my hands on. So anything and everything. And I pretty much like nothing else really. I just did what I needed to do. I was actually in my last semester of my college because
Mm-hmm.
I had taken a semester off. So that's why I was in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And I just did what I needed to get by in my classes. And my real goal, my real intention, and all of my passion was poured into learning about Islam. And it was books, and it was also I would find videos. There was a video of Yusuf Islam and from his early time of having been, converted to Islam.
Yeah.
And I would listen to his talk and um, things like that. So it was just about really just taking in and absorbing as much information as I could, until I ended up coming to a crossroads where I had to make a decision about it.
Mm-hmm. And so did you attend the mosque in New York City? And what was the atmosphere like that? Like, because it was so close after 9/11. Did you find other converts? Because I know that there's like a statistic out there that says that there were more converts to Islam in the 10 years after September 11th than ever in the last 1400 years. I'm sorry. Which is really interesting. How did you find the atmosphere in New York City at that time?
So that is really remarkable, but it makes sense because this is, when people make changes, it's because, oftentimes we have to be kind of stirred to make a change, be pushed in some way to make a change. Most people don't just start looking to change on their own without any provocation. And so 9/11 was that provocation where it made a lot of people question, what is this religion, Islam? How could it be that bad that it actually, encourages people to murder innocent human beings, right? Exactly. And so for people to try to understand, that doesn't make any sense. A faith, a world religion, one of the main monotheistic faiths of the world, like that you learn about it, however nominally in school growing up, like it is one of the world's faiths. How could it be this bad, right? So then now you can't maintain that cognitive dissonance. You can't maintain that chaos in the mind. And so many people started to look into it so that they could understand better. And then by looking into it and understanding about it, they realize actually it does not promote any of that horrific, activity like terrorism, but actually it's intended for all of mankind. And it's the thing that my soul has been searching for forever,
Right.
So, so that makes perfect sense. But the funny thing about my story is that I still, after returning from Palestine and accepting Islam, in fact, even my shahada was by myself on a street in Brooklyn between me and God.
Mashallah.
And I actually didn't meet any Muslims for a really long time. I remember very shyly walking into a masjid and I bought some cassette tapes of the Quran with the translation. I didn't really talk to anybody. I went in, I bought the tape, I left. At one point I went into a store and I wanted to buy a hijab. I shyly grabbed one, put it on the counter, purchased it, left. And so my interactions with Muslims remained very, very, very minimal and for a very long time.
Was there a reason for that?
It just wasn't really a thought for me for some reason. I don't know why. I guess because my entry point had been through books. It was really just so much about my own soul. And it wasn't at all about interacting with other people for quite some time. And I'm actually really grateful for that. I know it works both ways. Some people benefit so much from having a community around them and that support. Yeah. But for me, when I did start getting into sort of the communities and stuff, a lot of it was actually difficult for me. And so I was really grateful that I had years of having developed on my own before coming into a community. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that's exactly true because sometimes, again, it all goes back to the human tends to judge a religion by its adherents. So when the adherents don't behave as the Quran orders them to or would like them to, it becomes sort of disappointing to the convert, because they think, oh, when I convert to this perfect religion, I finally found what my soul has been searching for. And then you find these imperfect sort of believers that maybe don't seem to appreciate the gift that you feel like has just fallen into your lap, that you've like so desperately searched for. And so I think that can be a little bit it can be misguiding, because one might say, well, is this just like in theory, or is it in practice as well? Right. And so sometimes the I would say probably, the real dedicated Muslims, well, I would say probably in the whole world, there's a smaller percentage of real adherent believers of any faith. And so you're more likely to come in contact with people that are maybe more culturally adherent to their religion, and that can be very confusing, again, to a person who comes into any religion through books, because we expect to find perfection in the believers, right? So I think you're absolutely right, where you strengthened yourself alone, but that also is not easy, because there's so many I want to say fitna in Arabic. They say fitna of like, things that can sort of throw you off course, and corruption and, different things like that. And so it's hard to stay on the path by yourself. And so that's why in Islam, we're encouraged to attend, especially the men are obligated to attend the Jumu'ah prayer, to maintain that sense of community and to support each other. So that when our faith goes up and down, as the Prophet, peace be upon him, has told us, that we have other believers to lift us up, and that we don't stray off the path by ourselves, because we might not be surrounded by, other practicant Muslims. So it is sort of remarkable, your path. So did you ever officially take the Shahada in a masjid with witnesses, or did you kind of just consider that your official becoming Muslim?
Well, I considered that my official becoming Muslim. I did at some point, someone had asked me to relay my story in a masjid, and I decided that in the lecture I would just say the Shahada, like when I shared my moment on the street in Brooklyn. So I did say it out loud in front of people at that time, but that was years later. So, I never actually felt the need to go and make it official, like I'm accepting Islam today, because years had passed of me having been building up as a Muslim and practicing Islam. So I didn't really, I mean, I guess it's like, if I had people around me, they would have been like, okay, let's go to the masjid and do this, or now you have to do that, right? But I didn't have that. So I was really developing at my own pace and in my own way, on my own time. So
right. Wow. Now, how did you find the establishment of the prayer and learning, the prayers in Arabic and sort of establishing the Muslim lifestyle? Like all those changes are sort of, they're kind of difficult to weave into a typical American lifestyle. So how did you find doing that by yourself?
So that's another, sort of side benefit of the way that I did it, because it really was on my own pace. I didn't have people telling me from all directions, like, you have to do this and I have to do that, and, overwhelming me with stuff. So I was really able to take my time. No one was being like, oh my God, you're a Muslim, you're not wearing hijab, I didn't have that. And so I was able to learn and grow in a way that was really natural for me. And so when I found out, you've got to pray 5 times a day, I was like, okay, how do I do that? What is the prayer? What are the meanings behind the prayer? And then I was able to get a recording, at that time, it was a long time ago, no real internet, the way we have it today. So, I had like a cassette and I would listen to it over and over again. And then little by little, I built up my prayer from the first sentence, finally to the last. And I would make like little sheets of like, okay, this is how many rakas or how many sequences in each of the 5 prayers. And I would have it there to remind myself. And so, I kind of taught myself through the different pieces. And then when it comes to things like hijab, I eventually got this huge fire in me. Like, I want to wear hijab. I need to wear hijab. And I was so excited about it and yearning for it. But I was still going back and forth between like, well, how am I going to explain this to people when I go outside? People who know me, they're just going to be like, what is that? What are you doing? And then my family, what are they going to say? And just in general, like, what is it going to be like? Like, it was a very different way of presenting myself to the world than I had been used to, even with hijab, I gradually went from the way I used to dress towards hijab. And unfortunately, also not having anyone around me to guide me, I ended up throwing away a lot of my clothes, thinking I really needed to change my entire wardrobe, not realizing that it only mattered like that I cover and I wear hijab when I go out in public,
Right.
So that was a funny thing. But, yearning to wear the hijab and then worrying about like, how was I going to explain this and how is it going to be taken by the outside world? Like, those were the kind of things that kind of held me back for a little while and made me falter until I finally got, built up the strength to be able to go for it.
Yeah, I think probably one of the, if not the most difficult thing about, at least some people say about putting on the hijab is actually thinking about doing it, because your mind plays these games of what about this? What about that person? What are they going to say? How am I going to react? Am I strong enough to explain? And so, but then when you actually do it, you realize, oh, well, that wasn't as bad as my mind was thinking it was going to be. However, you do, as Muslims, we do face adversity. We should expect adversity, because how are we going to be tested if tests don't come, right? So we can't expect to say La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah if those tests not coming. We have to prove that we're real believers, right? So can you talk to us about maybe some of the reactions of your family and friends or society, and if those were positive or negative?
So I did begin telling people before wearing hijab, like that I either wanted to study Islam, like that was my complete passion and focus. That's what I wanted to do after college. And so I started kind of like trying to weave it in, because this whole path that I had been on, not only was I not around Muslims, I wasn't really sharing my progress with anyone else very much either, except for maybe little bits and pieces. And so it was very hard to kind of have to backtrack and be like, well, for the last, X amount of time, I've been going through all of this, and this is what the results, now I'm a Muslim. Right. And so I started trying to inject it into my conversations. And, I did tell my family, which I had been a rebel. I had given them a very hard time on multiple occasions. Like when I went to Palestine, they did not want me to go. They objected. They forbade me from going, and I went anyway. So I had really been, sort of tough on the people around me. And so it was on one hand, like, okay, it's just another one of Danielle's things, the phases she's going through, or wild, whatever, like chase that she goes on. So on that side, it was like, yeah, we know to expect the unexpected from her. But of course, Islam isn't your average run of the mill, rebellion or choice to make. Right. So it was definitely a bit concerning. And so I got a lot of worry, I guess, a lot of very loving, compassionate fear about what is going to happen to you. And are you making a choice that's going to ultimately be harmful for you? And so that was the real concern on my family's side. With friends, I just got a lot of bewilderment, like, really? Or like, don't you know that they don't treat women well? Like, you of all people, why would you be doing this? But a lot of, I guess, just questioning or just thinking that was really strange from people. When it comes to hijab, there's something that I guess kind of tips things over the edge, because the American culture, you grow up with so many subliminal messages about who are Muslims, what is Islam. And it's always, for the most part, shown to be very exotic, very foreign, very different. It's them, not us. And so when you say you're a Muslim, that's one thing, is you still look just like you look, right? And you're not wearing any symbol or making yourself appear as the other. But what happens with hijab is like, suddenly now you don't look like my daughter anymore. You look like one of them. You look different, right? Exactly. So that's a hard thing. Yeah, it's a very hard thing for people to wrap their heads around. And it's a very hard thing for people to embrace emotionally because of that subliminal programming. Like that's how we were raised. This is what we think. We don't even know why we think it, why we feel this way. But it's from years and years of having been shown those images and those stories. Yes. And so I know that was a big challenge, and it was a big challenge, especially for my mother, which I can imagine as a mother, just seeing your daughter and suddenly she doesn't look like your daughter anymore, even though, a piece of cloth, like we wear clothes all over our bodies. Why, when you put it on your head, does it make a difference? It shouldn't. But the only reason it does is because of those attachments and those beliefs and those associations that we've been building in our subconscious mind for our lifetimes. And so that was a very natural reaction, but it was also very painful. So I know it was very painful and difficult for them to try to honor me and honor my choice and respect that and love me unconditionally, but also have that issue of like, well, it just doesn't feel the same anymore. Like, even my dad recently, very recently, just a few years ago, he saw me driving like into the parking lot where they were. And his first thing was like he saw me and then he had to do a double take and be like, that's my daughter, like that's not some foreign person, some random foreign person, but that's actually my daughter in that car, turning. So he had that moment, and that's after almost 20 years,
Right.
So it's a difficult thing to overcome. But the way that I have, like what I have done, and I've like built this up over time, is just, I feel it's very important to, number one, know why I do things and feel very strongly about them. If I'm going to make a decision, to stick with it, and then to really just carry my head high and exude confidence with that. And I feel like that's made a really big impact. And that in general, the people I interact with, the interactions have usually, 98% of the time been positive. And I believe part of that reason is just because I choose to, build that confidence inside myself, and then make sure that I present myself as a confident and friendly person, an approachable person.
Yes. And have you found that certain people wouldn't entertain conversation with you about why you were making those choices, or was there ever, I guess there's people who listen and want to know, and then there's other people who actually just don't want to know. Did you find that?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that's a funny one in a way. Like it's, you have people who are very inquisitive and they want to know why, right? And they'll ask why, and they're very curious, and they'll listen to your reasons and try to understand it, right? And even if they disagree with it, it doesn't matter. Like they still want to know. And then you have, I think, which is the majority of people, at least in my experience, that they will kind of say like, oh, you want to study Islam? Oh, you want to become Muslim? Okay. And there's really nothing more. Like that, you can tell they're not quite comfortable with it, but they're not going to actually inquire any further. Like they don't even want to know.
Yeah.
And I feel that for the most part, definitely I had a couple friends that wanted to get into conversation with me when they were like, no, why would you want to study that? They treat women really bad. And then if I would say, like, give my rebuttal and my explanation, they were very blocked off from listening to it, because they had already formed a very specific belief and they were sticking with it regardless of what I had said. And then with family, despite being really caring and compassionate and loving, there was definitely a hesitation around wanting to learn the real reasons behind it. And I attribute part of that to my own fault for not having explained it throughout the process. Like, by the way, I'm reading the Quran now. I'm doing this project. I'm going to prove religion's false. Like, hey, call my mom up on a weekend. Like, I stopped reading the Bible because this Quran is like insane. And I'm just, mind blown. And I'm just reading it every day now. Like if I had taken them through the journey with me, it would have been so much better.
Yeah.
But instead I had to blast them right at the end. And like, because I hadn't communicated all that time, who am I to expect them to suddenly want to communicate with me now and ask all these deep questions, right? I hadn't been open to that throughout the entire process. So definitely a part of it was me and my own behavior. And then the other part of it, I believe, which this is just an assumption or like an, inference that I'm drawing a conclusion based on my observations, is that people are afraid to know, right? Like, look at me. I went through this whole process. And at the end of the day, I was stuck with this huge decision. Like, okay, I realized Islam is the truth, but do I actually want to do something about that? Like now I'm stuck. I have a really big decision to make. I have to either accept the truth or I have to pretend I don't know it. Like it's both of them are not easy, right? Like pretending you don't know the truth. That's not a life to live, right?
Exactly.
It's like living a lie. And so people don't want to be faced with that choice. They don't want to be stuck at that same crossroads. That's like a scary place to be. And it's an uncomfortable place to be. And so I think the lack of wanting to know from people is very natural. And the only solution I can really think of, like in my case, would have been if I had been open about the entire process from the beginning, but we can't go back in time. So now I just got to do my best from here on out.
Right. Or you could write a memoir and write down all of
actually. Yeah, these interviews that I do and the writings that I do, like sometimes I will share them with my family. And I just hope that by hearing kind of the backstory, that at least they'll get some insight and realize, like, number one, it wasn't just something on a whim. Like I didn't make decisions out of nothing. I wasn't trying to just be a rebel for the sake of being a rebel and do stuff that upset people because I wanted to upset anyone. But it was actually like a very heartfelt and genuine and sincere quest just to discover the reality of things. And then that when I was faced with that choice, I had to make the honest choice. I couldn't live with a lie, so I hope that they'll listen to these and actually gain that understanding, which I failed to give them throughout the earlier times. But yeah, like a memoir or definitely these interviews, I feel help because they go back in time. And I really do hope that by listening to them, they can get that insight and feel a little bit more at ease, about the whole thing.
Right. Well, I mean, just, even without listening to these interviews, I mean, just on sole observation, you can see that your decision wasn't influenced by any other Muslim in your life, or you didn't get married and then convert. So that's sort of an excuse like, oh, he brainwashed her or this, God guides us through different mediums, right? It could be through a marriage, it could be through a friendship, it could be, in your case, really, I mean, he just guided you, and so, and this really is, alhamdulillah, like you just said, thank and praise to God, because they really can't use any of those excuses like, oh, she's been brainwashed by your husband or this or that, or she's just converting because she wants to make it easier for her marriage, or, I mean, you really did it on your own. So it's also kind of a battle that you don't have to face, that maybe other people might have to face to prove their sincerity. But, to an outsider like me, it really, your sincerity in the quest for truth is so blatantly obvious that it's hard to understand how someone couldn't see that.
And I think that goes back to like the fear, right? If you're afraid to kind of know the what's behind it, then you're going to come up with your own. You're going to try, at least, right, to come up with your own reasons. Like maybe she was brainwashed. Maybe it was that trip she took. Someone gave her some kind of pill. You know what I mean? Like, who knows? So I think coming up with the reasons in the absence of information and being too afraid or too uncomfortable to ask those questions is the reason, there's still so much sort of unknown left, even after these almost 20 years,
Exactly. Well, your experiences certainly make you qualified as a transformative transformative coach, that's for sure. How do you use your experiences, and what is your sort of career look like when you help other women transform their lives like you have, and sort of live to their fullest potential?
Well, thank you for that question. Well, so this is definitely my passion. I mean, not only that transformation that I went through, but transformations that I've been through after as a wife, as a mother, have really inspired me. You know, like God says in the Quran, that he created humankind in the best of molds. And so I feel that means not just spiritually, but also physically, emotionally, mentally. And so we've been created in the best of molds. But what do we do with that? We often debase ourselves and we bring ourselves down to the lowest of the low. And so what I really want to see, I want to see women, you know, we've been imbued with so much power, so much capability. And oftentimes it is, you know, we end up being the ones who hold ourselves back, but we tend to think that it's from some external source, you know, like I'm not exercising because this and because of that. But when we start to really, you know, I love to bring women back into themselves and recognize their own power, so they realize that they can take control over all of these aspects of their life, that they can be the decision makers and they can be the ones who change those external things that they initially thought were the reason for their own, you know, failings or inabilities, that they actually have so much power and control over the environment, over the future, over society and the world that we live in. So bringing women and making them recognize that, yes, you've already been created in the best of molds. Like if you're not up there, that's not because you can't be up there. Right. Something has happened. You know, you've been brought down low, and often at times it's ourselves that are in our own way. And so breaking away from those barriers and clearing out the things that are blocking them from reaching their true potential, that is just, it's so inspiring to me. Like I am so passionate about that. And I love seeing women kind of break out of the bonds. And, you know, there's actually also, I think part of this is because of that thing, you know, like women in Islam and stuff like that. Like how are women raised? Even for me, I think during a period of my, you know, of being a Muslim, I felt like there was a certain role for women, and like, this is all I've got. This is just what I'm meant to do. And, you know, that's definitely coming from a lot of there's a lot of, I mean, cultures across the world, Muslim and not Muslim, tend to kind of put women in a box in one way or another. And so when you really look at Islam, you realize that actually women have been created with just as much power, capability, and opportunity and possibility as men. And so really reaching that potential. And I feel like it's sort of freeing women from those constraints that they end up, at the end of the day, we're putting them on ourselves. You know what I mean? So even if you can blame a man for treating a woman a certain way, probably the large portion of that man's upbringing was from a woman. Right. You know, he has been trained to think a certain way, to behave a certain way. And a lot of that training came from a woman. So as a woman, you have power now to influence the men that may be children, for example, in your life. Absolutely. To not treat people that way when he grows up and becomes an adult and is in charge of a household. Right. Right. And so realizing that power, how much influence and power we actually have. Like, I believe women are the fire in the belly of humanity. Like, we're the ones actually running society. We're the ones, you know, creating sort of the trajectory of the future. At least we're able to be, but we've often been told that we're not. We've been told we're weak. We've been told we, you know, don't have that ability. So it's a lot. What I do is definitely a lot about having women take that back, recognizing that, realizing that, and then be able to use it so that they can live a full life, that they can have a great quality of life, and so that they can make an impact in the world, however they want to do it, whether that's in their family through raising their children, whether that's in their work that they do, in their neighborhoods by interacting with their neighbors, or through a career. You know, we have so much that we have to offer. And so I love the idea of like opening up that door and letting women step into that power and owning it, and then being able to really, feel great about their life, feel empowered, and then empower those around them as well.
Wonderful. And have you been able to create like a local community of women that you coach, or have you been able to like build that around you? Or is it mostly like virtually, or how does your...
Yeah, so I do both. So I have a community that we're building here locally where I have fitness classes and I hold events, social events, and also transformative coaching events where we do like group coaching, or we do mixes of group coaching and fitness. And also, learning about health, because part of this journey, right, the entire journey, we're traversing it in a body. And so learning how to respect, honor, and love your own body and really treat it well so that it can be a great vehicle for you to be successful in this life, and to also like respect it as the gift that it is from God. Often we end up like hating our bodies in different ways, but when you look at it, it's really actually, this is the vehicle God gave you. And so, letting women step into that as well. And then I also coach women virtually, so online. So anywhere in the world, I can work with women from anywhere around the world. And, I also love working with women in person, because I feel that connection that women end up forming with each other is also a big part of it. So I like both ways.
And how can women contact you? What's the easiest way?
So the best way would be probably through social media. So through Instagram, I'm on Instagram, and I'm on Facebook. My business page is Everfit Valley.
Everfit, yep. Like EVERFIT. Yep.
Everfit, one word, and then Valley. So that's my Facebook page. And then I'm on Instagram as Danielle LoDuca /Everfit Valley.
Okay.
Yep. And then my websites are there where people can book a call with me if they like, or, you can just message me, and, I always try to answer and respond to any questions.
Okay, perfect. And then I wanted to ask you about if you could talk about your love of horses and how you found horseback archery, which is like, talk about reviving a sunnah.
Yeah.
Like you really hit the nail on the head with that one. Wow, that's amazing. And how this is sort of like had such a influential impact on your growth.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for asking this. This is one of my favorite things in the world. So I absolutely love horses. And we used to actually have horses when I was a teenager. And it's funny because at that point I thought, well, how could I get on this creature and tell him where to go? Like maybe he doesn't want to go there. Maybe he doesn't want to run. So I hated the idea of riding at that time. And I used to like grooming and caring for the horses, but I did not ride at the time. And so after a lot of changes that happened, so from getting married, and I have alhamdulillah 5 children, just going through that whole experience of being a stay-at-home mom, and just really over exhausting and overwhelming myself, and really harming my body actually through lack of sleep, and just working so hard, just trying too hard, and giving to everyone else except myself for a long period of time. It was actually horses that helped to kind of revive me in a way. And so like literally putting my foot into a stirrup one day was the first act of like self-love that I did for a very, very long time. Yeah. And so that became something for me that I maintained. It took a little while, like for me to actually make it something I did regularly, because I was not used to giving to myself anything. And so that took some time. But the horse, like, so forming the relationship with a horse, going back to what I said about when I was a teenager, now being a Muslim and realizing that Allah has created things on earth for mankind. And one of those things is a horse, and horses are such incredible creatures. Their presence is powerful. Like they have an electromagnetic field from their heart that radiates out like 10 feet around them, and you can feel it, and so you can interact with them on so many different levels. And then to partner with a creature in such a way where you're working together and you're going towards a destination, or you're accomplishing some sort of goal, and you're communicating back and forth. You're telling the horse something and the horse is telling you something. To be able to have that kind of connection with another creature, I think is just so miraculous. And so there's that part of it. There's that healing power that they have of being inside their energy. And then there's the challenge. Like it was one of the first things that I tried in my life where it was actually really difficult for me. And, I was not very good at it. And it took a lot of effort to just be able to get to the basics. Like right now I've been riding for years, and my young daughter, she hopped on a horse, and within 6 months, she probably surpassed me, like my abilities on a horse. And so for me to be working through, and this is a lot, like it ties into what I love to teach women as well. And also my journey through Islam is like working at something when it's difficult, but staying committed to it, and, looking at the good parts of it. So maybe I'm not like the best rider in the world, or maybe I'm not where I would want to be, but like looking at the process and realizing the steps that I've taken, how far that I've come, and the way that it's helped me in other ways in my life as well. So, it's influenced and impact my life so many different ways. And then of course you add archery to it, right? That's not only, not only are both of them a sunnah, but it's this, like, it's about, I guess, finding this confidence and this power within, and like working towards that, and then representing it in the world in a physical way. So
mashallah, that's amazing. Did someone train you to do the archery on horseback, or did you sort of train yourself?
So I have attended clinics where people teach that specific sport, horseback archery. Wow. But it's very hard to find in my area. So I'm actually practicing both of them separately, and then just looking for opportunities where I can travel somewhere, or if someone happens to come local, that I can work with them directly on both together. But otherwise I'm just pretty much, I'm doing horseback riding with a trainer, and I'm doing archery, which is actually really hard to find a trainer doing the specific type of archery I do in my area. But then I'm trying to learn, through articles and books and videos online, like how they come together. And, one of the reasons I chose this is because I know it would be like a far off goal, like becoming a proficient horseback archer is going to take a long time. So it gives me that thing to look forward to in the future that I'm working towards. And so I have to be consistent in order to get there, but I'm not expecting to get there tomorrow or even next year. So that was one of the ways that it really helped me as well.
Right. And are your children interested in it as well?
I have daughters that are very interested in horses, not necessarily horseback archery. Although I try every now and then. I'm like, so you want to come with me? Let's do it together. So there's slight interest, but mostly just with the horses.
Do you have your own horses?
We did, but now we actually just ride at the barn where we take lessons. We just ride their horses.
Oh, that's nice. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned also you have an interest in neuroscience as well. Do you want to explain that a little bit?
Oh, sure. Yeah. And this ties in with everything because I love learning things that show me just the incredible intricacy and detail and thoughtfulness of creation. And so neurosciences does two things for me. One is it helps me in my work with women because I understand the brain. I understand, what we're capable of and how things work inside the brains. So in other words, then you know how you can change it, right? Or make it easier for people to make changes in their lives. But then the other thing is just, oh my God, like subhanAllah, the way that we are created is so incredible. Like for me, most of the neuroscientists I listen to maybe are not religious, right? And they're like evolution, out of nothing, right? And it just happened this way because of that. But to me, it's always confirming, my faith and it increases my awe of the creator because like, I'll give an example. That's pretty simple to explain. So in your retina, which is basically your eyes are an extension of your brain. In the bottom half of your retina, which sees in your vision, it's the top half. So if you were looking at the sky, that sky is actually being seen by the bottom of the lower half of your retina. So the lower half of our retina have specific cells that are there. They specifically receive the light, the specific colors of light, the blues and yellows of the morning light, early morning light, like after sunrise. And then those cells then send signals to and they program your internal clock. So not only is it incredible that we have an internal clock, right? It's very accurate, but those cells are there specifically to receive light from above the horizon, and the specific colors of light that are given off after, when the sun is really low in the sky. And so just those kind of things where there's something specific in your body that connects with the environment in a very perfect way. And then, programming that clock, it programs the release of serotonin, which helps in your sleep cycle later in the day. And it's just incredible the way everything is connected. So those are the reasons.
Rhythm, right? The whole circadian rhythm.
Exactly. Yes.
Controlled like predominantly through the eye. It truly is amazing.
It is. It's so amazing. And so I love learning it because it's so just fascinating, and it just, makes you see the intricacy of creation, but also it's so useful, knowing something like that you can use it. And the other thing is that you find so many of these things are actually, they've been in Islam the whole time. So practices we have in Islam that we're told, just do this. Then you find the reason why or how it actually works in science. And a lot of that is through neuroscience. So like our prayers, the impact of our prayers, now they're doing studies on meditation and finding all of the myriad of benefits for the human being, like improving your immune function. Right. And then we're told to do dhikr, we're told to do dua, we're told to think good of Allah, like the positive thinking and the results of that on the brain. So it's just so deep and so multifaceted. Like you could just keep studying forever. And then the newer the science, the more incredible, right?
Yes, right.
So I absolutely love it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's awesome.
It is. It's amazing. So one last thing, I feel like we could talk for weeks with you about so many different topics. It's hard to like wheedle it down, but I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that you're passionate about helping others with their journeys to Islam and within Islam, and that you were perhaps dissatisfied with some of the approaches taken by some of the, Islamic community centers and mosques. So can you sort of talk to the ways that you might do things differently and help women in a different way than what they normally offered in the communities?
Sure. So I think that, like we talked about earlier, the mix of culture and Islam. So one thing I could say, I guess, off the bat would be that for people who are new to Islam, or for Americans that are interested in Islam or they want to learn about Islam, I think it's so important to differentiate between the cultural practices of the predominant, group of people in that location and the actual teachings of Islam, because there's a lot of confusion around that. Like, number one, it could be very off-putting because it makes it seem as if you have to leave your culture behind, right? Or if your culture is wrong, even worse, right? Like, oh my God, my culture is so wrong. Now I have to start wearing a certain color or dressing a certain way or putting certain things in my home. I have a friend who, after she became Muslim, she decorated her house with reds and golds, like her Arab friend did, thinking that was part of Islam.
Right.
So the definitely differentiating between the actual teachings of Islam and culture, or even better, maybe showing people how Islam can be married with their own culture so that they feel very at home and very comfortable. I think the biggest block to at least Americans, in my opinion, is definitely that the cultural divide and the feeling of like the other, and not realizing that the Quran mentions multiple times, oh mankind, like this is intended for all human beings across the planet, everyone.
Right.
And so Muslims often don't realize how much intertwined their culture is with Islam, and they think their cultural practices are Islam. So something about that, like separating those two things out and having a really clean offering of education that that is divorced from culture, or maybe shows how culture is complementary in so many ways to Islam, but you don't necessarily have to become a Pakistani or become an Arab or become, an Indonesian in order to practice Islam.
Exactly.
And so I think that would put so many people at ease, and that would actually ease the relationship problem too. Like when you become a new Muslim and now you got to go explain it to your family, but you're looking like an Arab all of a sudden, you know what I mean? Or you're looking like or you have to eat certain foods, the smells are different and the spices, like, those are irrelevant. Like maybe that's great. Like you want to embrace other cultures, you want to learn about other cultures. That's fantastic. But when they seem to be inseparable, that's very off-putting. Right.
Exactly.
And so that would ease things for people as they transition into a new life of being a new Muslim. So that's definitely one. And that goes on so many levels, right? So when you walk into a masjid, there was actually one of the first masjids I tried to walk in after being a new Muslim, right? Not having support. Mm-hmm. And I got to the door and the sign was written in Arabic on the door. So I didn't know if anyone was here. I didn't know if this was the door I should go in. I didn't know what it said. I didn't know what to do. I felt so pushed away. Yeah. And so I left. I didn't go in. I left and I walked away. And so that prolonged actually the time for me, not knowing any Muslims, not ever walking into a masjid, just feeling so alienated by that culture, by the language. And so I think that's a huge part of it.
Yes, definitely. Well, I really encourage all women out there to contact you. And if they are looking for coaching, someone to talk to, counseling, I mean, you are really an amazing resource that we have in our global Muslim community. And, for non-Muslims who are interested in learning more about Islam and thinking that this might be the right path for them. I mean, I can't think of anyone better than you for them to contact. Mm-hmm. So, mashallah, may Allah really bless you and reward you for all of your sincerity and hard work and determination to stick to the truth. And I really can't say enough about you, mashallah.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much. I appreciate that so much.
And again, I feel like I could sit here and go on for 3 weeks and never stop. But maybe we can do another talk with you, inshallah, God willing, in the future.
Inshallah, that would be fun.
So I want to thank everybody for joining us today on the Becoming Muslim podcast, which is a part of untoislam.com. Again, you can check out the website for more information on the topic of converting to Islam, and always submit any questions that you might have via that website. So we wish everybody a wonderful day and assalamu alaikum, and that means peace be upon you all, and just blessings from all of us over here. Thank you so much, Danielle. We really, really, really enjoyed this interview.
Thank you, Lindsay. I enjoyed it as well. Thanks so much. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.